DDR1 RAM. The very first generation of DDR memory launched in 2000, and it completely changed how computers handled data. Before DDR1, we had something called SDRAM, which could only transfer data once per clock cycle. But DDR stands for double data rate, meaning it transfers data twice per clock cycle instead of just once. This doubling made everything faster without requiring more power or generating extra heat. DDR1 operated at speeds between 200 and 400 megatransfers per second, and it used 2.5 volts to function. Now, these numbers might not sound impressive today, but back then, this was groundbreaking technology that made multitasking smoother and allowed games to load faster. DDR1 modules came in capacities ranging from 128 megabytes up to 1 gigabyte per stick. You'd typically find these in desktops from the early 2000s running Windows XP or even some older office computers. The physical design used 184 pins, which became the standard connector format. However, DDR1 had limitations. The maximum bandwidth topped out around 3.2 gigabytes per second, which quickly became a bottleneck as software grew more demanding. Still, for its time, DDR1 was revolutionary and paved the way for everything that came after. DDR2 RAM. Released in 2003, DDR2 took the foundation of DDR1 and pushed performance significantly further. The key innovation was increasing the bus speed while actually lowering the voltage to 1.8 volts. This meant faster data transfer with less power consumption and cooler operating temperatures. DDR2 operated at speeds between 400 and 1066 megatransfers per second, essentially doubling what DDR1 could achieve. The bandwidth jumped to a maximum of 8.5 gigabytes per second, which made a noticeable difference for gaming and video editing. DDR2 modules used 240 pins, a different physical design from DDR1, so you couldn't accidentally install the wrong generation in your motherboard. Capacities ranged from 256 megabytes to 4 gigabytes per module. You'd find DDR2 in mid-2000s computers, particularly those running Windows Vista and early Windows 7 machines. The improved efficiency meant laptops could run longer on battery power, which is why DDR2 became standard in portable computers during this era. But there was a catch. DDR2 had higher latency than DDR1, meaning it took slightly longer to access data even though it could move more data overall. This trade-off didn't matter much for most users, but enthusiasts noticed. Despite this quirk, DDR2 dominated the market for years and represented a massive leap forward in memory technology. DDR3 RAM. When DDR3 arrived in 2007, it became the longest-lasting RAM generation in history. Seriously, people were still building new systems with DDR3 well into the mid-2000s. The voltage dropped again to just 1.5 volts, and speeds ranged from 800 to 2,133 megatransfers per second. Maximum bandwidth hit 17 gigabytes per second, which was more than enough for demanding applications like video rendering and modern gaming. DDR3 kept the 240-pin design but changed the notch position, so again, you couldn't mix it up with DDR2. Module capacities went from 512 megabytes all the way up to 8 gigabytes per stick, with some high-end modules reaching 16 gigabytes. What made DDR3 special was its perfect timing. It launched just as HD video and gaming were taking off, providing exactly the performance boost those applications needed. The lower voltage meant even better battery life for laptops and less heat generation in desktops. DDR3 also introduced something called dual-channel and quad-channel configurations, where you could install multiple sticks that worked together for even faster performance. This generation saw the rise of overclocking culture, where enthusiasts would push their RAM beyond factory speeds for extra performance. Gaming communities obsessed over finding the perfect RAM timing and frequency combinations. But here's what most people don't realize about DDR3. It stayed relevant for so long because the jump to DDR4 wasn't immediately necessary for average users. DDR4 RAM. Released in 2014, DDR4 is still the most common RAM type you'll find in computers today. The voltage dropped to 1.2 volts, and speed started at 1,600 megatransfers per second, but can reach well over 3,200 megatransfers per second in standard configurations. Some high-performance modules even hit 5,000 megatransfers per second or higher with overclocking. Maximum theoretical bandwidth reaches 25.6 gigabytes per second, though real-world performance varies based on configuration. DDR4 uses 288 pins, making it physically incompatible with DDR3 motherboards. Module capacities exploded, with standard sticks ranging from 4 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes, and server modules reaching 128 gigabytes or more. The architecture changed significantly too. DDR4 introduced bank groups, which improved efficiency by allowing the memory controller to access multiple areas simultaneously. This matters more than raw speed for certain workloads. You'll find DDR4 in everything from budget laptops to high-end gaming rigs and professional workstations. The longevity of DDR4 mirrors DDR3's dominance, partly because the performance gains satisfy most users' needs. DDR5 RAM. DDR5 launched in 2021 and represents the biggest architectural change in RAM history. The voltage dropped to 1.1 volts, and speeds start at 4,800 megatransfers per second, with current modules reaching 8,400 megatransfers per second and beyond. Maximum bandwidth hits 64 gigabytes per second, which sounds insane until you realize modern applications are finally starting to need it. DDR5 uses 288 pins like DDR4, but the notch position changed again so you can't accidentally install it in the wrong slot. Module capacities begin at 8 gigabytes and currently max out at 64 gigabytes per stick, with future modules expected to reach 128 gigabytes. But here's where it gets interesting. DDR5 moved the voltage regulation from the motherboard directly onto the RAM module itself. This allows for more precise power delivery and better overclocking potential. Each DDR5 module also operates as two independent 32-bit channels instead of one 64-bit channel, which improves efficiency when accessing data. The technology includes on-die error correction, meaning the RAM can detect and fix minor errors without involving the CPU. This feature was previously only found in expensive server memory. Gaming performance doesn't always show massive improvements over high-end DDR4, which confuses people. The truth is that DDR5's advantages shine in workloads involving massive data sets like 3D rendering, scientific simulations, and AI processing. Video editors working with 8K footage finally have RAM that won't bottleneck their workflow. However, DDR5 launched with higher latency than mature DDR4 kits, similar to what happened with DDR2. As the technology matures, manufacturers optimize timings and latency drops. Early adopters paid premium prices for modest gains, but that's always been the case with new RAM generations. Today, DDR5 prices have fallen significantly, making it the obvious choice for new builds.